Coming up on Video Game Nation, I experience wonder in the tundra with the magical Never Alone.
I'll be thinking, therefore I aming, with my top 5 games with a message.
I explore ways in which gaming can enrich our cultural heritage by chatting to Never Alone's lead writer, Ishmael Hope.
And of course, our panel of industry experts will shoot opinions out of their pretty mouths.
It's not a case of having to pick one or going in a single direction. There's room for everything.
So join me on a journey into the unknown on this week's Video Game Nation. Robert Nazareth Cleveland was considered to be one of the greatest storytellers among his fellow Inupiat, the indigenous people of North Alaska. In 1965, Cleveland noticed that his memory was fading and so decided to record all of his tales to tape before it was too late. With the official written language of the Inupiat still in its infancy, these recordings helped to preserve his stories for future generations and allowed them to be transcribed and translated for the rest of the world to enjoy. Over 40 years since Cleveland's death, the increasing influence of modern American culture has not only reinforced the need to keep Inupiat traditions alive, but to also keep them relevant to a digitally literate generation. So, in an unprecedented move, the Cook Inlet Tribal Council, a non-profit organisation that provides educational support for Alaska Natives, launched Upper One Games, the very first games company in the US to be owned by its indigenous population. Upper One's goal is to team up veteran game designers with members of the Alaska Native community to create games that celebrate their heritage. Now, I don't usually feel obliged to provide a short history lesson before my reviews, but hopefully this short tale should give you some idea of why Never Alone, the first fruit of this unique collaboration, is something a little bit different and a little bit special. Heavily influenced by Cleveland's tale, Kunuk Sayuka, Never Alone stars Nuna, a young Inupiat. This brave girl is in search of the source of an endless blizzard that threatens her village. No sooner has she run into a spot of bother with a grumpy polar bear when she's joined by a mysterious and absolutely adorable Arctic fox who can commune with helpful spirits. As the title suggests, Never Alone is best enjoyed in the company of another. While you can switch instantly between the two companions in single-player mode, the AI can occasionally verge on the suicidal. Besides, looking out for a friend is far more in keeping with Inupiat values. This I know thanks to the informative and fascinating mini-documentaries that you unlock as you progress. These cultural insights allow the Inupiat to discuss their culture and values in their own words, and are best watched during play as they bring a great deal of context to the events that unfold. Did you know, for example, that the Northern Lights are actually the spirits of dead children that want to play football with your head? Yeah, not so pretty now, are they? What could have been an easy attempt to shoehorn in educational content works because it's so closely entwined with the story, as our experts no doubt agree.
It's quite a clever idea of actually educating people, through playing a video game, which obviously, is something that they should be doing more and more of.
It's something that I don't really know a lot about. I think in the West we don't learn a lot about that culture and we don't learn a lot about that history. So for me, it felt very informative, and I'd quite like to see that for other cultures around the world too.
The game makers got together with the tribal elders and talked through mythology and talked to them about how they tell stories and how they pass on stories to their children. And that's really fascinating because I think now video games have kind of got that sort of role now in some ways. Video games is a way to pass on stories.
In Never Alone, the culture insights blew my mind. I had no idea that the Arctic fox had such a tough life. It's freezing up there.
Never Alone is a traditional fairy tale at heart, which means that its fantastical elements are never called into question, nor is it shy about tackling the subject of death. Nuna's mortality is rarely in question. Younger gamers might be shocked by the number of times she succumbs to a polar bear's claws or is crushed between two glaciers. In fact, with its young, fragile protagonist, unforgiving, isolated environments, surprisingly frequent restarts and cerebral platforming, Never Alone shares close spiritual ties with the excellent Limbo. This extends to its brevity. It'll take you just 4 hours to see everything it has to offer. However, each chapter adds an interesting new wrinkle, including a surprising event in the final third that switches things up considerably. It just goes to show that it's not the length, it's what you do with the time that counts.
I don't think there should be a set length that a game has to be. No one's concerned when a film clocks in at 80 minutes to tell its story, or a TV show takes 200 hours. it varies depending on what the thing is that you're making.
I think there's a place for short games. I think a game can be 3 hours long and be just the right length depending on the game. If it's the kind of gameplay where it doesn't have to be stretched out over 15, 20 hours, then that's perfectly okay.
As long as you're getting quality, it doesn't so much matter about quantity. But saying that, sometimes you just want to play a short game that you can finish over, you know, one night or a couple of nights. You know, we don't always have time for these 100-hour RPGs.
Sometimes I want to play a game where I know I'm going to finish it really quickly, mainly because then it means I can like go and play some more games. And all the other games that are like, you know, 10 hours, maybe 20 hours, and they sit there in your pile of shame, mocking you for not playing them. And you know there aren't enough hours in the day because work, stupid work, keeps getting in the way of it. God.
I think, you know, we've got to stop thinking of video games in this term of, well, it's 8 hours long, therefore it's not worth any money. If you have an amazing experience in that time, then it's worth every single penny.
I'm all for short games, but then you are looking at somebody who spent 70 hours on Dragon Age Inquisition over Christmas instead of spending any time with his family. So, and then it turns out I'm rubbish at fighting dragons. So I'm probably about half hour from the end of the game and I will never finish it. I'm really angry, although not as angry as my family.
Taken at face value, Never Alone isn't the best platformer you'll ever play. Nuna's leaden movement can frustrate, as can its dependence on trial and error problem solving. However, this is so much more than a mere platformer. It's a game so deeply imbued with the values of the culture it represents that it will raise awareness of Inupiat culture, not just among its own people, but among the entire world. In that respect, it's as significant a cultural event as Robert Nazareth Cleveland's recordings were 50 years ago. Never Alone teaches us many things: that we should have a greater respect for the natural world, that we should aim to be selfless, and that animal spirits make for fantastic platforms. It joins a growing group of games that strive to tell us something about the world and ourselves.